Hello, everyone. Get comfortable. We're going to start our webinar replay with Mark Shepard on forest ecology and restoration agriculture. So we'll get started here in a minute. Make yourself comfortable, and we will be with you in a second. So this is the Economic Action Team with webinar replay with Mark Shepard. How you all doing? Just coming to you from the Economic Action Team, EAT community. We'll get started here in a minute. In a minute, we'll be with Mark Shepard, forest ecology. I guess everybody is well, and here we go. So, how is everybody doing on Friday afternoon? We are here for Mark Shepard's webinar replay, which will begin in just a moment. Just hold on tight.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our 11 I've been here before. You're going to love this. This is going to be fun. You definitely want to go back and listen to replays. Mark has been with us. And, I've been in a McDonald's parking lot in 100-degree weather in Southern California. I've been in Yuma, Arizona at 120. We've done it for Maryland. We've got it. We first fire that's burning about half a mile from us. It's going the other way, but we may get evacuated. This is Mark's show tonight anyway. Again, go into the replays, which are on the Economic Action Team site, and that is, I won't give the URL, I'll give it. And you, if you aren't already opted in and you're registered for this, you will be. I will make a stop with that and turn it over to Mark. Okay, hey, welcome everybody. Curriculum. I just unplugged my computer, and I really do encourage you guys to go back and look at all of the talk about, and each session is going to wheat seller than in English because there are more people involved in agriculture who speak Spanish, whether it's in, Northern English when it comes to agriculture. Forest ecology, the scientific study, repeatable avoiding plants. It doesn't always have to be a closed canopy woods that many of you are familiar with, especially our Vermont. Basic rules of ecology apply whether there are trees there or not. Just that we're talking about systems that include trees. Hills right here is in a phase of site development. We've done a little bit of touch to me, like there's a lot of blowing sand dunes. It could have been drift at the end of a glacier. It could have been a former desert area that's become moist, and now it's developing into a grassland. The physiognomy of the forest itself is going to look different, whether you're in the tropics, the Arctic, subarctic. System change happens in your lifetime and my lifetime. What we do when we're on the ground, planting trees, man doing, and this is just some successional shots of my place. This is 20 years ago in southwest Wisconsin when I thought there were some trees in the foreground here. Alternating strips. In between these strips is a small grains, alley of small grains, alley of the South Ridge, that has a young chestnut forest on it right now. This was 2000. If we were that last shot, looking across at this ridge, the alternating strips of grains and produce going there. These are successional changes until now. Here it's all grown together and you can almost hardly see the rows sometimes. Little change. And managing that succession of the system, let's see if I can go back. Yes, I can. This right here, it's going to continue to grow. In northern hardwoods, plant communities that we've planted here, they will eventually, with enough moisture and no duff layer, spring-grown ephemerals, lots of decay and fungus, this will eventually grow to a closed ecological phase, also known as a sear. I can keep it in that phase that's most advantageous to warm the successional process. We use the species, and we know that this process is going to take place. We're going to go from bare soil of a corn place. This is actually quite changes the ecosystem, the species composition, new species come in, old species get burned out or blown out or eventually become extinct for whatever reason. We want to understand how the structure, species composition, and the function of our system works. Disturbance regime that we use to manage our system. Disturbance includes landslides, major ecosystem components on the short cycle, once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year, once a decade, once every 50 years, or as in this case, where it's all over again. That's a pretty serious disturbance if you happen to have been living there. Disturbance includes banking collapse, and it disrupts the existing vegetation. This little place right here looks like it could be new. Somehow disrupts this, and there's a whole host of different things that could disturb it, from wind to insects to disease. Understand how the systems recover in order for us to learn how to interact with our own farm. And if they're trampled, then we know how to manage our animals in order to accomplish objectives. We can use the animals as observe nature, how it works, understand these different disturbance regimes and recovery regimes in order to manage our crop going down. It can be from very infrequent, like tens of thousands, millions of years, to, every single year. Material of the soil changes the soil properties. It changes the light and the temperature regime. And with all of ranging the parent material, somehow changing the soil property, maybe by the addition of new mineral elements that came down the foot, configurations, different temperature regimes, all those different things, we can affect our site and affect all those little fawn. Knowing these things will help us to do our work as a farmer rancher far more efficiently and effectively. Less actual labor time and the less expense is involved in managing our system. But we have to understand the case in point right here. These were, you saw these a couple weeks ago, high density chestnut trees that have closed the canopy now. The sun is starting to not strike the forest floor, and so we're not getting grasses. They're getting replaced by more. I want to have more chestnuts on my trees. I need to somehow disturb this site. And so perhaps I come in through and I act like a windstorm. Here, these are all mostly black locust. There's quite a few sugar maple that were in there, some American hawthorn bean. Of course, exclusion of disturbance is its own kind of disturbance, and the classic is what the redwoods has had 60 to 80 years of intentional fire exclusion, which really has caused, we need more trees to grow. It's good to let the trees grow. So you have these nice parklands, whether it's is in this open park, redwood savanna. And of course, disturbances don't necessarily happen just one at a time, and there provides an infection site for disease, which weakens the tree, which becomes susceptible to insect attack, and then the infected tree doesn't survive. And for us to understand that it's not the most obvious thing, it's not the bark beetle cycle of cycles, we need to understand that most plant communities don't start completely from scratch. There are survivors that will be providing a certain amount of biotic inertia to change over Texas, the trees and shrubs and bushes and grasses around you. They're sending seed in, there's pests together. You're going to be taken over with all the natural things that are coming in, invading your beautiful little system. So remember, human disturbances are still disturbances. They may be a lot more damaging. Hanford facility, nuclear waste, maybe a million or so years, no problem when it comes to a planet. To reseed this, as soon as the people are gone, the process is going to start. Succession is going to start over, clothe that site with trees. slides, you've mixed these rocks. So when you uproot the tree, all these rocks and the soil particles now get mixed thoroughly with this organic topsoil. So what I wanted to point out in that particular case right there is what's happening here when we have a depression that now can collect this organic matter that decomposes, that can have a liquid case. In this context, with these species, helped these trees to get established. Well, now we see that was in a pile. So we have an example here of what happens. I'm not saying this is good or bad or right or wrong. This is an observed 5-10 years as all the organic matter decomposes. There's more air in here for aerobic bacteria, and chunks of gravel are all exposed to the oxygen. They're going to start to oxidize. The acids in the rain, humic acids, are going well. Here's those little trees getting established. And I already mentioned all this as the roots decompose, organic roots right here. Now, gaps created by this disturbance allow extra light to come in, allows them to grow a little bit faster here. Doesn't matter necessarily what opened up that canopy, the trees here. Now we're getting to the exciting part. The wind, of course, tends to remove the overstory trees. A lot will ring off, they'll snap up top, while climbs all the way to the trees and crowns out. That also will remove overstory, but those actually are the exception. It's not listening. So fire worldwide has been every climate, even in the tropical rainforests, even swamps will experience fires. This is Zoda. And notice that a brushy layer has been removed. The taller trees that have to have a little thick, they manage to survive. Their branches young, they fall to the ground. There's no what they call ladder fuels that allows the fire to climb up like that. Climb up areas. It doesn't just wipe out massive acreages uniformly. Even if it covers, 1,000 acres got burned with different intensities. And it's a heterogeneous effect in that you're going to have these random patches that will be seriously burned to the ground. And that's all part of the whole diversity dance that allows that site. These types of trees here provide habitats for different plant or insects and plants and fungi than these types. This much a mosaic of landscape forms is set up by fire. And as a selective force, the plants here, it obviously affects animal communities, but started, I think it was in the 1920s, when that island was burnt. See later on, and it grows really well with very little competition. One of the things that also happens with fire, example, cherries, plums, apricots, they can self-pollinate, pollinator other than itself. Obviously, once it pollinates with itself, there's been a slight genetic change period of time. But most trees, if they have a lot of self-pollination going on, they'll grow a little bit of tree pollen. And it's obvious too that fire, as it goes through, is going to cause a reduction in competing vegetation. I can survive a fire. Your life is far better without all this competition around you, whereas you're not growing up. What I want all of you guys to do as we're going through this exercise is to think about how these differently respond to fire, and if this is a response that we want, if we want to have reduced competition, resembles fire very closely, or maybe fire itself, will create those conditions for us. Make this in a very cost-effective, economic manner, and how can we have the vegetation respond this way? We need to understand this kind of disturbance if these are the effects we want. I'm not saying that fire in your system is good versus phenomenal. What does fire do? It does all these things we've talked about so far. One of the things that it does is in a lot of fires, especially on sloped ground, you don't have any more surface plants with the fibrous roots flows. So now what happens if there was an unburned place, unburned area down slope, and all this debris, all this new ash and mineral soil moves on top of this layer of organic matter that was the grasses and widespread using in these larger trees. These larger trees were left behind. These are the legacies. Classic, how it depends on fire for its regeneration. So it just casts tons of, really relates to a lot of what I talk about with planting a system wherever you live, is because we are planting mostly seedlings, because we are intentionally using the process of clones because they have a predictable crop size, flavor, ripening period, harvestability, all that kind of stuff for uniformity. Planting because we want to have the abilities to survive no matter what kind of distance. They're individuals that we call varieties. Individuals that are more resistant to fire, that grow fast. We want to have the total number of plants on site for that genetic variability. And we like this, all of this fire right now, or all these trees right now are a serious fire hazard. Next fire, 4, 5, 6 times by the time these trees got to be this big. Actually, there was somewhere I was just reading 5 years, there would be a fire at any one site. If you just stood there for 5 years, you're going to get a fire within 5 years. Pretty fast. High density pure stands to be planted built up in there. You have extra sites for insect outbreak, disease outbreak. So fire created soup, seed goes down. They all were planted about the same time naturally. So they grow even breaks. So now you got bark beetles or spruce budworm. Now you've got all this dead and dry material here. Colorado campers have. Leads to additional fires. And once again, once you burn these trees out, different sites with different moisture regimes will have a different fire period, how frequently the fire comes through. Basically, lodgepole pine, the ponderosa pine, is it actually wants to have fire. It's a fire dependent species. It's not viral strategies, probably next week. Fires will also help to eliminate parasites like mistletoe. So establishment of this species, pretty much a single species, maybe a couple, 3 at the most. How do we use that? How that now we have this big, huge fire hazard? Maybe this is the time to log if we don't want it to future and shred this material, inoculate with mushrooms, etc. How do we understand now eliminating parasites, mistletoe? you may want to eliminate them because you don't have as good green all the way down. But we also want to think about this. This is actually a very useful product. Anybody for the holiday season, and actually I've worked quite a bit with growers in Oklahoma. The anti-cancer compound. I don't exactly know how it's used, but that's used in the herbal cancer is ponderosa pine or jack pine. It'll burn through, the seeds will come down. It's favorable conditions for southern pines, red pines, white pines, lodgepole pines, oaks of the whole oak savanna region, whether it was California, the western humid oak savannas. The oak is not like the most shade tolerant late successional species. There were repeated fires, and of course grazing and browsing was thrown in there as well. That these fire-dependent species in a local, if the case may be, but within a certain fire period, each different trees will have a different fire period, and all of these different species I just mentioned are different. And if the fire regime spruce is not very fire tolerant at all, Douglas fir is a little bit more fire tolerant. Savannas with the grasses underneath. Well, if the fire is even more frequent, even these trees will get more frequent. Less frequent, it'll be more angled than spruce. Well, then if it goes the other way around, if we have, now, then all of a sudden our less fire or more fire sensitive, they would burn out for the seed because they needed to be burned in bare soil underneath in order for them to propagate. So then it'll become Douglas fir, and eventually all these different disturbances interacting with one another and with fire. Even fire burns 1,000 acres, a square acre of different age classes left behind. And this is part of how we carry species that one particular insect might play an important control role in some of our total species diversity of our area on our site if we have a mosaic of age classes, sizes for zillions of years before Europeans got here. And I'm going to show this one again. I mentioned it briefly with the shade tolerant. They have to be shade tolerant, otherwise they wouldn't survive in the shade underneath these red pines. Those red pines, they'll get established. Their light seeds will float and land on the mineral soil. They'll get established that way as seed blew in. They got established. Well, then underneath, they can't get established in the shade, so it's not, both of which are extremely special directions that we can send the site depending on what we choose to do with it. So once again, to stay a fire-dependent site that's colonized by fire-dependent plants will tend to stay that way. A red pine site story brush as it grows up will tend to burn off. Now the stand habit determine how that particular stand of trees will be affected by fire. If you have a super high dense stand of trees and you're used to being destroyed, not like gone to waste. If you have a species that are intermixed with oak, if you're going to be affecting the ground level beneath trees like this, the stand habit, whether it's grazing or haying or burning. Now, the site condition, each site determines which trees are able to reproduce. And like we mentioned here, these red pine trees that go away and expose the mineral soil, these trees require plowing if you have it that way. With fire, the selection pressure. What's going to happen is the species that are most adapted to that site system. So if you want to get some really fire-resistant oak, for example, go to a place that's like they grow on really low, lousy soil, and they may start having acorns when they're really, really tiny. Look to reproduces without any soil growing in the crack of the rock. So obviously, if you're in a place like that on my farm, this big, huge one. Next week, we're going to talk a lot about individual fire adaptation, and then what's kind of really significant for many of us. This is especially in North America, specifically the ones that are more fire related, that have a fire history. The western pines, ponderosa, aspen. If you look down anywhere in the south, mid-south, central south, Douglas for the Rockies, if you live anywhere here, understanding how these ecosystems work, how figuring out how to imitate a system like this to produce your own food, fuels, medicines, fiber, and the Front Range of the Colorado Rockies, and there's a fire right over the ridge, you might say, hey, man, I'm all set because I'm not going to get burned out. Or, hey, I'm looking forward to a fire. I want it to come through. Instead of having to, be seeing things. Now, if we understand